Let's see. Okay, yeah. That's just so strange. So what I was saying earlier about what happens in the day three of the Karen Reed case is attorney Matthew Tympanik of Tympanik Law. What I can tell you is this: in these types of situations where you're trying to find the best type of jurors, you're trying to think, how is your evidence going to play against them, and how it's going to, when they're trying to kind of ascertain who's the best jurors, what evidence is going to be found persuasive, and what evidence is going to, they're going to be kind of de-emphasized. One of the biggest things, a perfect example would be, is Michael Proctor's testimony. That's going to it's going to be absolutely infuriating to every single individual on the jury, but especially more so than women, because he's texting about how he's um it's like, oh, have you found any nudes? It's like making fun of her for the MS stuff. So you're going to need to find people that it's like they're going to be able to hear it and be upset by it, but eventually they're going to be able to move on past it. Um, you don't want people who kind of live in the gray if you're the prosecution, especially because you don't want people to be able to open the door of this conspiracy. And you especially don't want your foreperson being on that side of that. Because if they actually buy into it, that could give grounds for reasonable doubt. Like, how do we know it wasn't Brian Higgins and Brian Allen? That's not the type of jurors you want. If you're the defense, that's absolutely what you want. So I'll give you an example. So today I had a stand your ground hearing dealing with two brothers' attempted murder case. And the whole point was to see if they were entitled to immunity. That was the hope. However, it's not a situation where um, I didn't really expect to win the hearing. I had a good faith basis to file it. I had a good faith basis believe that we could prove it. But I did not think ultimately the judge was going to grant it. The judge doesn't really grant this motion often, and judges don't really grant this motion often. But the point is I had a good faith basis to file it, but also the fact that I wanted to put the witnesses under oath. These witnesses hadn't been part of the case for many years. They had this happened in 2021, this alleged shooting, and I wanted to see if the stories was going to change, because if they did, then eventually I can be able to impeach them with that same situation. And what happened today is two brothers took the stand. One, he's like, oh, none. When I asked him the question, what'd you guys do early in the day? The allegation and the belief is that they rolled past my client's house and shot him up when they ambushed him while they were sitting in their driveway. My clients then grabbed some guns, chased him down, and shot at him. My clients weren't hit at all, but the other guys got hit pretty badly. So it's a situation where it's like, was that an imminent threat? And it's like, well, that was the third time that somebody tried to shoot up their house in the last week. The expectation is those people were the same people who tried to shoot him three times. They're independent witnesses, people who saw the exact vehicle that we believe the individual was shooting, the shooter driving, that he's known to use that vehicle. So when the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to test out like how they would present a trial, so that I know which jurors are going to want. These kids came off like total punks. One of them, so one brother, like there's a picture they're pointing guns at like a camera, like look at how tough I am. They have a video where they're threatening my client's mother. They have a picture of her and she's like, you're going to die and stuff like that. So it's like, I want to see how they're going to present. And they came off horrific. One brother was like sitting there, like it was no big deal. He's charged with attempted robbery with a firearm. This kid is just a total peach. And they're like sitting there, not taking it seriously. And the witness chair is like, it's none of my business. So I'm like, all right. When I am going to pick my jury in about less than 2 weeks, so like a week and a half, I'm going to be two plus weeks. I'm going to be looking for people that are going to be really offended by this idea that these alleged victims who got shot don't really care whatsoever, that their stories keep changing, that almost juror people's like, these people, for lack of a word, fucked around and they found out. They tried to kill my clients, tried to kill their mother, their 5-year-old sister, and then they tried to do it in broad daylight because they failed the 2 previous times. So when you're actually considering, it's like, all right, what juror people are going to be good for this case? Hearing these facts and here's presented, people who are law-abiding people, strong supporters of the Second Amendment, strong supporters of self-defense, and who believe that just because they drove off doesn't mean the imminent threat was extinguished. So when it takes you back to the Karen Reed case, you're like, okay, talk about Trooper Michael Proctor's testimony, talking about the vehicle strike. You want people on the jury who potentially people with a PhD, people who can understand all the hyper-technical stuff and can inform the jury, because they can't bring their personal opinions and into the equation, but they can bring their experiences that could better help understand some of the facts and evidence. One of the biggest things is it's like the idea that it was a second-degree murder case because she backed up like 26.8 miles an hour, whatever it was. But the Commonwealth didn't really explain that. They didn't articulate it. So that when a jury goes to deliberate the evidence, like, I don't even know what I heard. But if somebody's on the jury who kind of like, I used to work with vehicles, or I used to be a mechanical engineer, or I can explain what they were trying to say for you and interpret it. That's really helpful on your jury. When you have talking about like damage to some kind, the rear tail light, was it damaged when she backed up into it, or was it damaged prior to? You want people who are going to be like, use common sense. She backs up into the car. The tail light wouldn't, if it actually was really cracked, shattered, whatever it was they consider it, there would have been pieces of the taillight there at the scene. They weren't found there. They were found outside 34 Fairview, buried under the snow. And it's like, it's either it got cracked over at it got like destroyed, whatever the word you want to use, over at the residence at 34 Fairview, or it happened at John O'Keefe's residence. But look at where all the pieces are. None of the pieces are at John O'Keefe's house. They're at the crime scene. They're right near his body. They're pieces of the taillight on his clothing. So you need to find people who aren't going to be like swayed by this idea and this that, oh, this could be possible. Oh, if I think it's possible, it's a reasonable doubt. Remember, just because what is a reasonable doubt? It's not a mere possible doubt. It's a speculative doubt. It's a reasonable one. And the defense never really presented a reasonable theory. The third party culprit, Colin Albert, it's not going to be, he's not going to be a third party culprit in this case. That's been shut down. That's not happening. They can argue Brian Higgins, but Judge Canonian, who used to be a defense lawyer, is like, you have literally the bare amount to be sufficient. And when a judge says that, she's basically saying, I don't buy this. And nobody in any kind of jury that would be impaneled is going to buy it either. So they might need to change their strategy for the best situation in trying to get the best result. I still think in the case, reasonable doubt, integrity investigation, hammer that all day. And they might, with this, I don't know, Miss George, the jury consultant, they might change their strategy and go that direction because it didn't work the first time. And nothing says it's going to work the second time, especially when you got a better prosecutor who is already thinking 3 moves ahead of everything you do. Why? Because he has your job. That is his real job. This is his temporary job, being a special ADA. He knows exactly what you're going to do before you do. That's why he was brought in. And that for this big of a case, because yeah, the victim in this case deserves justice, whatever that is. But if the Commonwealth doesn't prove the case, then the defendant should be acquitted. Trials, I said this on Live Now from Fox yesterday. Trials are tried in courtrooms with facts and evidence. They aren't tried online by bloggers in kangaroo courtrooms. They're not. That's not how the system works. They're tried with facts and evidence that are presented at trial. And that's going to be something that's going to be a big theme about this case, because a lot of people, when they're asking voir dires, like, what have you heard about this case? When I usually ask that in trial, very few people are like, oh yeah, I've heard something about it. No, if you live in Norfolk County, you have heard about this case nonstop. It has its own tab on Fox 25. So when you're trying to find out what they actually know, you need to figure out and ask the questions like, how much are they really saying? Are they telling me everything that they know, or only they telling me what they want me to know? And that's with a lot of wide ire. So it's when you're doing this, your strategy is figure out the people who are not going to, who are going to be beneficial to your case, find out who are not, or yeah, both sides, but also find out who's going to be helpful to being able to explain important facts to your jury. You are looking for hyper technical people, people with engineering backgrounds, people who are, you don't really want doctors. You don't want, and I'll explain to you why you don't want doctors. Doctors are individuals that think at times there's a wonderful profession and they help save lives. But a lot of them tend to, when they're called for jury duty, like, I have this patient on the table. I can't miss this much time. I got a mortgage pay, this, that, and the other thing. Or I remember I had during a voir dire, a medical malpractice attorney was impaneled. And he immediately was like, and he starts complaining. And we were just so done with his complaining about everything that we just booted him off the jury and just went with an alternate. Because immediately, and he was like, thank you, blah, blah, blah. It's like, doctors aren't willing, like, we don't care. We both don't want you on our jury now. So it's all about, you're looking for certain types of people. You're looking with people with certain types of backgrounds. You're already in your case. While you're doing voir dire, you can't pre-try your case because you can't like talk about the facts. What do you think about this? What do you think if a trooper was going through somebody's phone looking for nudes? You can't do that. You can't do that. But you can give hypothetical situations. Like when you're a defense attorney, a good hypothetical situation is like, okay, you see somebody standing next to a pool and they have water on their legs. Who here would think that that individual went in the pool? And a good 70 to 80% of the hands would go up because that's what a reasonable person to think if somebody's wet and they're next to a pool. But there are going to be people who aren't going to raise their hands. And those are the people that defense attorneys love. It's like, well, it might have just been raining a few moments ago. Somebody could have got splashed with the hose. They were playing in the sprinkler or something like that. That's the type of people defense attorneys want. People who are thinking about, all right, I'm going to try to think long and hard. I'm just not going to take the state, the Commonwealth at their word. Prosecutors don't want those types of people. They want people who are law-abiding, black and white. Here's the law. Did you violate it? Yes or no? And that's not going, like, both sides. Any kind of experienced trial counselor is going to know those types of people, and he's not going to want it on there. I once did a case where, like, the foreperson was what I thought it was going to be a firefighter, and they had paid leave for the entire time. It was going to be a 2-week trial period, because you also got to think about individuals who are going to have to miss work. Because remember, most jury duty, you can't fire somebody for jury duty. You can't. But after a few days, you might not get pay. So people in the private sector, they're going to be thinking about that. And if they're impaneled onto your jury and they miss time, they are not going, and they're going to miss work and they're going to fall behind on payments. They're not going to be happy if you bring half a case, or you bring a case that is like, why didn't this, or something like that. So what you are definitely looking for in this type of case is people who are either retired, who are being paid by their job through the extent of it, because it's probably going to be a 6 to 8 week trial. And jurors have lives. They're not what attorneys think and hold them on this pedestal that there's just holier than life people. They're not. They're just regular people at the end of the day. So I think I saw that there's 5 men, 5 women. I would definitely want to know more about what their occupations are, what their background is, because it is important. It's like, if either side needs to have every single person on the jury for a reason. They allowed them on there. It's like, okay, I think this person might be good. Somebody, just because it's like, oh, well, we need an extra woman on the jury, or I need an extra man. That's not a good reason. That's not a reason to have somebody on your jury. Have somebody on the jury because you want them. You think they would be sympathetic to your cause. They think that they would be open-minded to what you are actually thinking, and they would be fair and impartial. Because on this case, there are going to be so many people who have heard so many things, and they're going to be in a position, not to go Marco Rubio, but I need water. So, and you have these jurors, it's like you're going to have, I think they're something like 2,000 have been called for jury duty, and they're doing a great job. They're at 10. I think they want a minimum of 16. I'd say 16 to 18. The reason you have so many alternates is because with this long a trial period, somebody might get sick. Somebody might be like, I can't do this. Somebody might be like, it's too hard of a burden, because they're asked all of this during voir dire, but until it actually happens, people don't actually know how difficult it is, how long the trial is. And you don't want those people sitting on the juror if they're just going to rush through deliberations. Because as we know, the last time it was like something like 24, 28 hours, something like that. And you want people, and I would expect something similar, but at the same time, that lengthy deliberation was due to the fact that Adam Lally did not pick the best juror. There was clearly 3 people on the jury that no matter what was presented, no matter what facts were presented, they weren't going to convict the defendant. Hank Brennan needs to make sure that doesn't happen again, that everybody on there has been individually voir dire, investigated, asked every question, make sure that they actually can be fair and impartial. Because anybody, I think I said this on the previous stream, anybody who says, I don't know if I could be fair and impartial, if they say, I don't know, and then they follow it up with it, yes, get that person off the panel. Try to cause challenge them. Continue to ask them questions until they cause challenge. Like, well, I have somebody who was arrested and mistreated by the cops. And it's a situation where I think that'd be ability to be fair and impartial. That's what you're always trying to do. Get the juror. If you want somebody off your panel, you want that person to say the words along the lines of, I think it would affect my ability to be fair and impartial. They're always going to say, I don't know. And then I always have to follow it up. If I were to hold you to a decision, a yes or no, because they're always going to say, I don't know, maybe, you got to get them to yes or no. And if they say yes, perfect. They're gone. They're going to be a cause challenge. The state, if they're really trying, they're going to be like, try to pretend like, oh, well, I be rehabilitated. No, you didn't. Stop. And then the judge just overrules that objection from the state, and the person's off your panel. Preemptory, you like I said last time, preemptories, you only get 12 because this is a life felony case, punishable by life. And what you want is you want to only use those cases on people you can't cause challenge, that you know are not going to be sympathetic to your case. Like, I can't fathom this person. If this person's on my panel, I might as well just hang the jury right now. So I think we got a few questions. Can the prosecution investigate their source to see if they belong to any charitable? Yes, and they absolutely will. And they will be asked that. And because if they lie under oath, because when jurors are sworn in the jury room, they're placed under oath. So when they're speaking throughout the case during voir dire, they're under oath and they have to tell the truth. So it says, no, I've never heard of Turtle Boy, or I've never been a part of Free Karen Reed. And then you go on to Facebook and they're like the administrator of the group. That person's going to get bounced, and they're probably going to get chastised for the judge for flat out lying. And they can say, well, I was part of it. Then stop. That it's just not going to fly. I definitely think that there might be more of a push to make sure to get people on the juror who are, I don't know, maybe as far out of Canton as possible. Because every single as like most of you know, I'm originally from Massachusetts. I used to play hockey in Canton. I was born in Quincy, and I don't think I've heard of one person in that town or any supporting town that hasn't picked up an opinion on the matter. So the fact that they've even found 10 right now in the last few days is nothing short of a miracle. Matt, do you think the Commonwealth should have prosecuted the juror who lied to get on the jury, the one who bragged in bars that she was a turtle rider? It's one of those situations where you would have to, it's very difficult to prove. And you're like, all right, we don't really want to prosecute jurors because juror service, we don't want to deter people from wanting to do that, because what could happen is if you're prosecuting somebody for doing that, for being a juror, people might use that as an excuse, like, well, I saw that juror and I'm too afraid I'm going to get prosecuted. I'm going to say something wrong. It creates a dangerous precedent, and it is just you want people to want to serve on a jury. You don't want people who's going to try to. Like I I if I never want to, I never have to sit on a juror because I know exactly what to say, and there isn't prosecutors, criminal defense lawyers in the area who would want me on their panel just simply because I've had both jobs and they don't know which way I'm going to swing on the issues. Because my belief is that I don't know anything until I've heard all the facts and the evidence. I can talk about it in real time, how it's playing, what the point of it is. As we find out, that's what we're going to do a lot more. I don't see myself really playing a video of this clip and then talking over somebody. I'm never going to do that. There's plenty of other streams where people do that. It's just kind of giving my thoughts on the case and kind of breaking it down to what you're actually seeing. I definitely so when looking at it and like motions keep coming out and like orders are being passed down day by day, and that's going to keep happening until the case is fully impaneled, which it feels like it would happen next week. Because they're already at 10. I think they're going to go to, I've seen minimum 16. I would say probably 18. It's just how many they can fit in the room, how many they can fit in the courtroom. That's what it's going to come down to. It's like, yeah, as a deterrent, potentially, but deterrents only, and here's the issue with it, deterrents only work for people who have the ability to be deterred. There's still going to be people on these the panels who want to get on and be like a sleeper, free Karen Reed person, or a person who already believes she's guilty. There's always going to be people like that. But I don't know. I think that the potential for preventing good people to get on the jury is outweighed by sending a message to one juror who kind of lied and got their way on. Matt, what do you think of Karen wanting to get the jurors' names? Sorry, it's already been asked. I'm just saying. Getting jurors' names, I think it's just for their juror consultants so they can look it up to make sure that, like the Commonwealth, when they're getting names in real time, that they can find to see if this person is in some Justice for John O'Keefe group or this, that, and the other thing. It works both ways. What I can tell you is that when I do voir dire, so I'll do voir dire in the attempted murder case starting Patriots Day. I get names of everybody who's in the case, who's in the panel. I know how old they are, their family history, single, divorced, married, whether they have kids, what their interests are, and then are they friends with law enforcement? Have they ever been convicted of a crime? All of this is potential bias, trying to find people. And I remember like probably the shortest what I ever did was a case where it was a sovereign citizen DUI case. The video was absurd. Jury was out 5 minutes, but he did my voir dire maybe lasted 5 minutes. I was like, yeah, you 7 people are good. Let's just go with you guys because it didn't matter. I had 2 people on the jury who had convictions for DUI, and they were like, yeah, I did it. It was a long time ago, but yeah, I don't hold any ill will. I was drunk. I shouldn't have drove. That's the type of people. If you want somebody who's been convicted of a crime, that's the type of the people on your juror that you're good with. If you're both the prosecutor and the defense, because if the person said no, that affected. I'm biased now towards law enforcement. I'm hatred of our criminal justice system. That person's never getting on the panel. And some defense lawyers may try to like argue it's like, well, you got to rehabilitate. No, they're not going to be on the panel. They've already proven that they cannot be fair and impartial. And so I definitely think that that's going to be, they're moving pretty quickly. So 10 jurors, 3 days is good. I would expect, so I think we'll just end with talk about what opening statements would be. I'm guessing next Tuesday, Wednesday, they should be fully impaneled. And opening statements, if Judge Cannone wants to just move this along, move right into it. Like if you're ADA Brennan, it's going to be, I hit him. Talking about the vehicle strike. They're not bringing in any of the kissing the girl and the Caribbean nonsense that just kind of confused the juror, didn't really prove anything. Talk about the kids who overheard them, Officer O'Keefe say that their relationship had run its course, and then talking about the tail light, where it was found, everything. And the defense is going to be like, Michael Proctor, integrity of the investigation, conspiracy. And it's like, she look the other way. I don't know if they're going to do the exact same thing again, but it might be along those lines, because with opening statements, if you're the prosecution, you want to speak and then the jury be like, what are we even doing here? They got him cold. But that's not how it works. Remember, opening statements, closing statements aren't evidence. And you can't argue during opening statements either. You can argue during closing, but you can't argue during opening statements. All you can do is talk about what the facts are going to be. And like people who've represented their self pro se, like I refuse to talk about the Lori Vallow case just simply because she's already been convicted and her representing herself is like the absolute worst decision. But at the same time, she's already doing like 3 life sentences. So I don't know how much more she can lose except just embarrass herself anymore in the case. But when you're doing opening statements, you don't want to be saying things like this is what the evidence would show. You want to tell us an engaging story that keeps the jurors' attention. Usually it'll probably take an hour, 2 hours to be able to do that, but you want to keep their attention. You want them to hang on every word, and you want to get out in front of the things that are going to be bad. Because one of the things that why the prosecution, like with Proctor, like all the jurors' jaws dropped during his testimony per word, per people in the courtroom, is because they weren't really prepared for it. You don't need to really emphasize it like a huge in the opening, but you want the juror to know that it's coming so that they'll be ready for it and they're not going to be as stunned as they were during the actual direct examination, where IDA Lally basically publicly shamed him, which was the right play. So to build credibility with the jury, didn't try to hide from it. So when Alan Jackson went to cross, that the jury had already hear all the horrible things, and they're just like, this guy's a piece of shit. And anything they were saying, it's like, all right, only confirming what they already know instead of like, oh my God. Yeah. When you're doing so, I definitely think that probably 16 to 18 jurors, it's probably going to end up being split right down the middle and with alternate jurors, like we know from the first trial, they don't participate in deliberation, but at any time they could be put in the panel. So whoever's the first alternate, somebody from the original 12 jurors is like, I got sick, or I can't do this, I can't financially do it. They're out, and then the new first alternate is in. So every alternate juror, you got to expect that they might end up on your panel. So don't like, it's an alternate, it's not going to hurt me that much. Because if stuff happens, they could be on your panel and you could be screwed. Because like I've said before, voir dire is exactly like Sun Tzu's The Art of War. The saying, every battle is won and lost before it has ever fought. As we knew from the first trial, that case was never going to end in a conviction. It was never going to end in an acquittal either, but it was just set up to end up in a hung jury from the beginning. Why? Because there was people who were voir dire who had already made up their mind, and they weren't properly like vetted and been able to ask questions to prove that they're not fair and impartial. They should never be there. Because like we said, even if you believe people, it was like a 9-3 decision on the manslaughter. That means 3 people were never in a million years going to vote to convict. And you just wasted 6 weeks, 8 weeks on a trial that was never going to end in a conviction. So I definitely think that it's going to be, it's going to be a similar situation. And I think a final, maybe just end with predictions. I definitely think you're going to see a much cleaner case. 88, especially 88 Brennan is used to crossing, but asks just every question that needs to be asked instead of asking irrelevant questions. Only ask. I know attorneys love to hear themselves speak, but the toughest thing to do is just simply ask the questions and sit down, especially on cross. And that's when you're like, stop, don't ask questions just because you're like, oh, I got him on the ropes. No, you don't. If you're actually thinking you got him on the ropes, you probably don't. You need to, and they're probably not giving you what you want. Every single question you ask of somebody needs to have a point. And I definitely think that's going to be a much bigger. The defense, yeah, sometimes asking like their witnesses were way out of whack, but at the same time, the Commonwealth wasn't really tidy with their question. They didn't really ask what they needed to, and they asked a lot of irrelevant questions and kind of confused the jury themselves. But like I said, I think that you're going to see a much tidier case, a much probably quicker case is going to move along. And it's kind of, all right, what does the direct physical evidence say and logic versus this conspiracy? And that's what it is. Jury trials are about two ideas. It's like, do you believe the prosecution theory, or do you not believe the prosecution theory and the lead there's room for reasonable doubt? And remember, you need to convince 12 people to all agree. If 12 people don't agree on it, hung jury. Or so this might be a situation where one of the ideas I've kind of thought about what might happen is the jury might see the evidence like, yeah, I think there might be murder here, but the investigation was so flawed. Maybe we just convict her of manslaughter and go home. That might be a realistic situation, just simply because this is very important. I think I'll end with this. Juries will always do what they think is right. So if jurors want to be able to go home and sleep at night. My father-in-law was on a juror, and it was a child porn case. Guy was convicted. It literally, they went back and they're like, guilty, 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 and then they still deliberated for a few hours, even after it was so clear. He said he still kept himself up for 2 nights because he was wondering he made the right decision. It wasn't until I told him, I was like, yeah, he had a previous conviction for child pornography that he had like okay, all right, thank you. We made the right decision. So juries will always do what they think is right. So I think I'll end with that. We'll have the next live stream on Tuesday, and we might be in a position where we'll be close to a panel. If not, we might even have a panel. If not, very, very close. For now, Matthew Timpanic, thank you very much. See you next week.